The extraction helicopter lifted off without him. Commander James Caldwell watched through hazy vision as the bird carrying his SEAL team disappeared into the Afghan night sky, rotors fading to silence. His leg was shattered. Blood pooled beneath him on the rocky ground. The Taliban patrol was 300 meters out and closing fast. His men had made the tactical choice. One dying officer was not worth risking 8 operators. The mathematics of war were brutal and simple. What none of them knew was that someone else had been watching through a scope from a ridgeline 2 kilometers away. Someone who never left anyone behind. Someone they all thought had died 6 years ago. Caldwell pressed his hand against the tourniquet above his knee, fighting the gray edges creeping into his vision. The femoral artery was compromised. He had maybe 20 minutes before blood loss took him into unconsciousness. Maybe 30 before his heart stopped entirely. The helicopter was gone now, completely vanished into the darkness. He could hear the voices of the Taliban fighters growing louder as they swept through the valley. They were speaking Pashto, coordinating their search pattern. They knew an American was wounded here. They would find him soon. Before we continue, drop a comment and let us know what state you are watching from. Maybe you have witnessed similar acts of courage where you are from. The first shot came from nowhere. One moment, the lead Taliban fighter was 50 meters away, rifle raised, and sweeping the area with his flashlight. The next moment he was down, the light clattering against stone. The sound of the rifle report followed a full second later, echoing off the mountains. Caldwell's tactical mind processed what his eyes had just witnessed. The delay between impact and sound meant the shooter was at least 600 meters away. Maybe more. The angle suggested high ground to the northeast. The remaining Taliban fighters scattered, shouting in confusion and fear. Another shot. Another fighter down. This one had been running, weaving between rocks. The bullet found him anyway. Caldwell felt his pulse quicken despite the blood loss. This was not suppressive fire. This was surgical precision. Each shot was a kill. Each kill bought him more time. The Taliban fighters were firing blindly now toward the ridgeline, their muzzle flashes giving away their positions. They were panicking, which meant whoever was shooting at them was very good. Another shot. Another man down. The pattern was methodical, almost mechanical. The shooter was working from east to west, eliminating targets in sequence. Professional. Calculated. Deadly. Caldwell tried to key his radio, but his fingers were numb. The cold was setting in now, his body prioritizing core temperature over extremities. He managed to depress the transmit button. His voice came out as barely a whisper. No response. The SEAL team was already too far away, focused on their own extraction. He was alone. Except he was not alone. Someone was out there in the darkness, killing Taliban fighters to keep them away from him. The firefight lasted 3 minutes. When it ended, 8 Taliban fighters lay dead or dying in the valley. The silence that followed was absolute. Caldwell strained to hear movement, footsteps, anything. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then he heard it. The soft crunch of boots on gravel, approaching from the northeast. Moving with purpose, but without hurry. The gait was different from what he expected. Lighter, more controlled. He tried to raise his sidearm, but his arm would not cooperate. A figure emerged from the darkness, silhouetted against the stars. The profile was wrong. Too small to be one of his SEALs. The figure moved closer, and Caldwell saw the rifle first. Custom bolt-action, suppressor, high-powered scope. A sniper rifle built for extreme distance. The figure knelt beside him and reached up to lower the night vision goggles. In the faint starlight, Caldwell saw her face. It was impossible. Captain Elena Reeves had died 6 years ago in Helmand Province. He had attended her memorial service. Her name was on the wall at Dam Neck. But here she was, very much alive, checking his wounds with the practiced efficiency of a combat medic. Her hair was shorter now, pulled back tight. Her face was leaner, harder, but the eyes were the same. Those pale gray eyes that had earned her the call sign Ghost. She did not speak at first, just worked. She checked the tourniquet, tightened it, then pulled medical supplies from her pack. Her movements were fast and sure. She cut away his pant leg to expose the wound, packed it with QuikClot, wrapped it in gauze. The pain cut through his shock, and he gasped. She met his eyes for the first time. "You are not dead," Caldwell managed to say. His voice sounded distant to his own ears. "Neither are you," she replied. Her voice was quiet but steady. "Not yet anyway. We need to move. More Taliban coming from the south." I counted at least 20. She helped him into a sitting position, and he bit back a scream as his shattered leg shifted. She pulled his arm over her shoulders and lifted him with surprising strength. She was maybe 5'6" and could not have weighed more than 140, but she moved him like he was half his weight. She had always been strong. He remembered that from the shooting competitions at Quantico. She had outshot every man on the range and then helped them carry their gear back to the armory. They moved northeast, away from the valley floor and toward higher ground. Every step was agony, but Caldwell forced himself to keep moving. He could hear vehicles now in the distance. Technical trucks, probably. The Taliban were bringing reinforcements. Elena heard them too. She adjusted their course, moving toward a rocky outcropping that would provide cover. When they reached the rocks, she set him down gently and unslung her rifle. She took a position behind a boulder, scanning the valley below through her scope. Caldwell watched her work. Everything about her was different from the officer he had known. That Elena had been by the book, always proper, always following protocol. This Elena moved like a predator. There was no hesitation in her. No doubt, just cold professional lethality. The vehicles appeared below, headlights cutting through the darkness. 3 trucks, each carrying 6 or 7 fighters. They stopped near where Caldwell had been lying. Men jumped out, shouting orders, organizing a search. Elena adjusted her scope, compensating for wind and elevation. Her breathing slowed. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger. Caldwell knew what was coming next. The first shot took out the driver of the lead truck. The second shot killed the man who appeared to be giving orders. The third shot punctured the radiator of the second truck, steam hissing into the night air. The Taliban fighters scattered again, but this time they were more organized. They had seen the muzzle flash. They knew where the shots came from. They returned fire, bullets ricocheting off the rocks around them. Elena did not flinch. She worked the bolt, chambered another round, fired. Worked the bolt, chambered, fired. Each shot found its mark. She was not trying to kill them all. She was creating chaos, buying time. The Taliban fighters dove for cover, their advance completely stalled. She had them pinned down, and they knew it. She pulled back from her position and knelt beside Caldwell again. She pulled out a radio, different from standard military issue. Compact, encrypted, probably off-book equipment. She keyed the mic and spoke in a voice that carried authority despite its quiet tone. "Nighthawk 7, this is Ghost. I have precious cargo that needs immediate extraction. Grid coordinates follow." There was a long pause. Then a voice came back, thick with shock and confusion. "Ghost, you are supposed to be dead. Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated," Elena said. "Can you get here or not?" Another pause. Then, affirmative. "ETA 20 minutes. Be advised, area is hot." "I am aware," Elena said. "Just get here." She clipped the radio back to her vest and checked Caldwell's wound again. The bleeding had slowed, but his skin was cold and clammy. She pulled an emergency blanket from her pack and wrapped it around his shoulders. Her hands were steady, but he saw something in her eyes. Concern, maybe even fear. It was the first human emotion he had seen from her since she appeared. "Why are you here?" he asked. "Why did you save me?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Because you would have done the same for me," she finally said. "Because that is what we do. We do not leave people behind." "My team left me behind," Caldwell said. The words tasted bitter. "Your team made a tactical decision," Elena said. "I made a different one." She returned to her position behind the rocks and scanned the valley. The Taliban fighters were regrouping, moving more cautiously now. They knew they were facing a skilled sniper. They would be more careful, but they would keep coming. They always did. Elena watched the Taliban fighters through her scope, calculating distances and wind drift with the unconscious precision of someone who had made these calculations 10,000 times before. The valley wind was picking up, blowing west to east at roughly 8 miles per hour. She adjusted her scope 2 clicks right to compensate. The fighters were spreading out now, trying to flank her position. Smart. Whoever was leading them had combat experience. Caldwell's breathing had become shallow behind her. She glanced back and saw his eyes fluttering. Shock was setting in harder now. 20 minutes until the helicopter arrived. 20 minutes was a lifetime in a firefight. She needed to keep him conscious and keep the Taliban at bay. Both tasks required her full attention, and she could only give each half. "Commander," she said without turning from her scope, "stay with me. Tell me about your team. Why did they leave you?" Caldwell's voice was weak, but he forced the words out. Compromised position. 8 men in the bird. Capacity was maxed. Weight calculations did not allow for a ninth, especially not one who could not walk. Elena's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice neutral. "Lieutenant Commander Vaughn made the call?" "Yes." He followed protocol. "By the book extraction. No unnecessary risks." There was something in the way Caldwell said it that suggested protocol was not the only factor. Elena had served with enough officers to recognize the sound of politics disguised as tactics. She filed the information away and returned her attention to the valley. 3 fighters were moving up the eastern slope, using the terrain for cover. Good discipline. They would reach firing position in 2 minutes. She took a breath, let it out slowly, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder with familiar comfort. The lead fighter dropped. She worked the bolt smoothly, the brass casing ejecting with a soft clink against stone. Second shot. Second fighter down. The third man dug behind a boulder pinned. She had bought another few minutes. The radio crackled. "Ghost, this is Nighthawk 7. We have your grid, but we're taking heavy fire from multiple positions. Cannot approach your location directly. Need you to move to alternate LZ. Sending coordinates now." Elena checked the coordinates on her GPS unit, and her stomach dropped. The alternate landing zone was 800 meters northeast, across open ground with minimal cover. She looked at Caldwell. He could barely stay conscious. Moving him that distance under fire would be nearly impossible. But staying here was not an option. The Taliban had her position fixed and reinforcements were arriving. "Copy that, Nighthawk," she transmitted. "Moving to alternate LZ now. Be advised, I have wounded personnel. We'll need immediate medical on arrival." "Understood, Ghost. Medic is standing by." She knelt beside Caldwell and checked his pupils. Dilated, skin cold and gray. His leg was stable for now, but every movement risked fresh bleeding. She pulled him to his feet again, and he groaned deep in his chest. His weight sagged against her, and for a moment she thought he would pass out entirely. She adjusted her grip, taking more of his weight across her shoulders. "We need to move, Commander. 800 meters. Can you make it?" Caldwell's response was barely audible. "Do I have a choice?" "Not really," Elena admitted. They moved northeast, away from the rocky outcropping and into the open valley. Elena kept low, using what minimal cover existed. Scrub brush, small depressions in the earth, scattered boulders. Each step was measured, calculated. Behind them, she heard shouting. The Taliban had found her previous position and realized she was gone. They would be coming fast now. Caldwell stumbled and nearly took them both down. Elena caught him, redistributed his weight, kept moving. Her legs burned. Her shoulders screamed. The rifle across her back felt like it weighed 50 pounds. Sweat ran into her eyes despite the cold night air. She ignored all of it. Pain was just information. Information could be processed later. A bullet snapped past her head, close enough to feel the pressure wave. They had been spotted. She lowered Caldwell behind a boulder and unslung her rifle in one smooth motion. The shooter was 400 meters back, muzzle flash visible in the darkness. She acquired the target through her scope, adjusted for the downward angle, and fired. The muzzle flash disappeared. More shots incoming now from multiple positions. They had her general location, but not her exact position. The darkness was her ally, but it would not last. Dawn was perhaps 90 minutes away. In daylight, she would be completely exposed with a wounded man who could not run. The helicopter had to arrive before then, or they were both dead. She pulled Caldwell up again, and they continued northeast. The terrain sloped upward now, rocky and uneven. Each step required conscious effort. Caldwell was barely helping anymore, just dead weight against her side. His head lolled forward. She could hear his breathing, ragged and wet. The leg wound might have nicked the lung. Internal bleeding was a possibility she had not wanted to consider. "Talk to me, Commander," she said through gritted teeth. "Tell me about your silver hair. When did that happen?" Caldwell's voice was distant, dreamy. "Iraq. Second tour. IED took out my Humvee. Burns across my scalp. Hair grew back white. My men started calling me Silver. It stuck. How many tours?" 6. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, Somalia. Places that do not have names on maps. Elena nodded, still moving, still climbing. She understood that perfectly. She had operated in those nameless places too. The places where official military presence was denied and casualties were explained away as training accidents. The places where people like her went when their governments needed something done, but could not acknowledge doing it. The helicopter appeared suddenly, rising over the ridgeline like an angry insect. The door gunner opened fire immediately, tracers cutting through the darkness toward the Taliban positions below. The bird flared hard, rotors kicking up dust and debris as it settled into a hover over the designated landing zone. The crew chief was already in the door, reaching out. Elena covered the last 50 meters at a stumbling run, half carrying and half dragging Caldwell. Bullets snapped through the air around them. The door gunner returned fire, his weapon thundering. Elena reached the helicopter and hands grabbed Caldwell, pulling him aboard. She turned to provide covering fire, but the crew chief grabbed her vest and hauled her into the bird. "Go, go, go," the crew chief shouted into his mic. The helicopter lifted immediately, banking hard left to avoid ground fire. Elena collapsed against the bulkhead, her rifle still clutched in her hands. The medic was already working on Caldwell, cutting away the improvised dressings, checking vitals, starting in 4-line. The crew chief stared at Elena like she was a ghost, which she supposed she was. The pilot's voice came through the internal comms, thick with disbelief. "Ghost, this is Nighthawk 7 Actual. I have about 1,000 questions, but they can wait. Right now, I need to know where I am taking you. We can go to Bagram, or I can drop you wherever you need to go. Your call." Elena looked at Caldwell. The medic had him stabilized and was working efficiently. The commander would live. He would survive to tell his story, which meant decisions needed to be made. For 6 years, she had operated in the shadows, officially dead, accountable to no one. Saving Caldwell meant exposure. It meant questions she could not answer. It meant the end of Ghost. But looking at the silver-haired commander lying on the deck of the helicopter, pale and broken but alive, she knew the choice had already been made. Some things mattered more than staying hidden. Some people were worth the cost. "Bagram," she said quietly. "Take us to Bagram." The pilot acknowledged and adjusted course. Through the open door, Elena could see the Afghan mountains falling away below, painted in shades of gray by the approaching dawn. Somewhere down there, Lieutenant Commander Vaughn and his SEAL team were flying back to base, believing their commander was dead. They had made their choice. She had made hers. The crew chief handed her a headset, and she put it on. The internal comms were alive with chatter now. The air crew was reporting the situation. Wounded commander recovered. Female sniper extracted with him. Identity unknown. Correction, identity possibly known. Waiting for confirmation. Elena closed her eyes and let her head rest against the cold metal of the bulkhead. Her body ached. Her shoulders throbbed. Her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. But Caldwell was alive. That was what mattered. She had not left him behind. The medic looked up from his work and caught her eye. He was young, maybe 25, and his expression was pure confusion mixed with awe. "Ma'am," he said hesitantly, "I know this sounds crazy, but you look exactly like Captain Reeves, the Marine sniper who died in Helmand 6 years ago." Elena met his gaze steadily. "I get that a lot," she said. The medic nodded slowly, clearly unconvinced but unwilling to push. He returned his attention to Caldwell. Elena watched the mountains pass below and wondered what would happen when they landed at Bagram. Questions would be asked. Reports would be filed. Her presence would be noted and recorded. The carefully constructed fiction of her death would begin to unravel. But she had made her choice, and she would live with the consequences. The helicopter touched down at Bagram Airfield just as the sun broke over the Hindu Kush Mountains. Elena stepped onto the tarmac and was immediately surrounded by security personnel. They did not point weapons at her, but their hands rested on their sidearms. A full bird colonel approached, his expression caught somewhere between confusion and anger. "Identify yourself," he said. His name tape read Morrison. Elena stood at attention despite her exhaustion. "Captain Elena Reeves, United States Marine Corps. Service number 07324958. Colonel Morrison's face went pale. "Captain Reeves died in 2017. I saw the casualty report myself." "Reports can be inaccurate," Elena said evenly. Behind her, the medical team was unloading Caldwell on a stretcher. An emergency surgical team was already rushing toward them. Morrison watched the activity, then looked back at Elena with narrowed eyes. His hand moved to the radio on his belt. "Secure this area," he ordered. "No one in or out without my authorization. And give me JSOC on the line immediately." Two military police officers approached Elena. One of them gestured toward a nearby building. "Ma'am, you need to come with us. Questions need to be answered." Elena glanced toward Caldwell, being wheeled into the medical facility. His eyes were closed, but his chest still rose and fell. The medic caught her look and gave a small nod. He would live. That was enough. She turned back to the MP and nodded. "Lead the way." They took her to a windowless room in the base operations center. Standard interrogation setup. Metal table bolted to the floor. 3 chairs. Observation mirror on one wall. They left her alone for 40 minutes. Classique technique. Let the subjects stew, build anxiety, soften them up. Elena had been trained to resist interrogation by people far more skilled than base security. She used the time to rest her eyes and slow her heart rate. When the door finally opened, 2 men entered. One was Colonel Morrison. The other was a civilian in khakis and a polo shirt, which meant intelligence services, probably CIA. The civilian sat down across from her and opened a manila folder. "I am David Chun with the Defense Intelligence Agency," he said, "though I think you already guessed that. You have created quite a situation here, Captain Reeves." "I saved a man's life," Elena replied. "I did not realize that was a situation." Chun smiled thinly. "Saving Commander Caldwell is not the situation. The situation is that you have been legally dead for 6 years. The situation is that you just conducted an unauthorized combat operation on foreign soil. The situation is that you have exposed classified programs that were meant to stay buried." Morrison leaned forward, his jaw tight. "Do you have any idea how many operations are compromised by your resurrection? How many cover stories just fell apart? We have assets in the field whose entire backgrounds are built on the assumption that you are dead." Elena met his gaze without flinching. "Then perhaps those operations should not have been built on lies about my death." The room fell silent. Chun closed his folder and studied her with professional interest. "Tell me, Captain, who authorized you to operate in Afghanistan? Who gives you orders? Who handles your logistics and intelligence?" "No one," Elena said simply. "I operate independently." Morrison slammed his hand on the table. "Bullshit. No one operates independently in a combat zone. You have equipment, weapons, intelligence feeds, extraction support. Someone is running you." Elena leaned back in her chair. "I have been off the books for 6 years, Colonel. I have learned to acquire what I need when I need it. And I have made contacts who ask fewer questions than you are asking right now." Chun and Morrison exchanged glances. Morrison's face was red with frustration, but Chun looked almost amused. He pulled a photograph from his folder and slid it across the table. It showed Elena from 3 years ago in Pakistan, captured by a security camera. She was wearing different clothes, and her hair was longer, but the face was unmistakable. "We have been tracking Ghost for 4 years, Chun said. Reports kept coming in about a female operator conducting precision strikes in areas where we have no official presence. Some people thought it was a myth, a ghost story told by Taliban fighters to explain their losses. But I always suspected you were real." Elena looked at the photograph, but said nothing. Chen pulled out more photos. Elena in Yemen. Elena in Syria. Elena in Somalia. Each image showed her in different locations, different contexts, always alone. He spread them across the table like playing cards. 47 confirmed kills, Chen continued. All high-value targets. Taliban commanders, ISIS cell leaders, Al-Qaeda financiers. Every single one of them was on our target list. Every single one of them died before we could reach them. You have been doing our job better than we have been doing it. So arrest me, Elena said. Charge me with whatever you want. But Commander Caldwell is alive because I was there. That counts for something. Morrison stood up, pacing behind Chen. It counts for something, he agreed, but also creates a massive problem. You cannot just come back from the dead and expect everyone to forget the last 6 years. There are questions about who declared you Kia. Questions about why. Questions about what you have been doing since. The door opened and a younger officer entered, handing Morrison a tablet. The colonel read it, his expression darkening further. He showed it to Chen, who raised his eyebrows. Commander Caldwell is out of surgery, Morrison said. Stable condition. And he is asking to see you. Elena felt relief wash through her, but kept her expression neutral. Can I see him? Chen stood up, gathering his photos. That depends. Are you willing to cooperate with our investigation? Are you willing to explain exactly what happened in Helmand Province 6 years ago? Elena considered her options. She could refuse, force them to hold her without charges, let lawyers and military bureaucracy grind away for months. Or she could tell the truth and finally put an end to 6 years of shadows and lies. She thought about Caldwell, lying in a hospital bed with a shattered leg because his own team had abandoned him. She thought about Vaughn, who had made that call. There were larger issues at play here than her own secrecy. I will tell you everything, she said, but I want on record. Official statement. And I want immunity for any unauthorized operations I conducted while declared Kia. Chen smiled. You're not really in a position to negotiate, Captain. Neither are you, Elena replied. I just saved one of your senior commanders. The optics of prosecuting me for that would be terrible. And I have information about corruption in the special operations community that you're going to want to hear. Morrison and Chen exchanged another look. Chen nodded slowly. We can arrange immunity for past operations, in exchange for full cooperation and testimony. Elena stood up. Then let me see Commander Caldwell. He deserves to know why his team left him to die. They escorted her to the base hospital under guard. Caldwell was in a private room, his leg elevated and wrapped in surgical dressings. His silver hair stood out starkly against the white pillow. His eyes were closed, but they opened when Elena entered. A weak smile crossed his face. You look terrible, he said, his voice hoarse. You should see the other guys, Elena replied. Caldwell's smile faded. Vaughn is here. He arrived 2 hours ago with the rest of the team. He is telling everyone I was dead when they left, that there was no possibility of survival. Elena pulled a chair beside his bed and sat down. What is the real story, Commander? Why did he leave you? Caldwell was quiet for a long moment. 3 weeks ago, I started noticing irregularities in our operation budgets. Funds being diverted. Equipment going missing. I started an informal investigation. Vaughn found out. 2 days before the mission, he confronted me in private, told me to drop it or face consequences. And you did not drop it, Elena said. I'm not built that way, Caldwell replied. The mission was supposed to be routine, but somehow Taliban intelligence knew exactly where we would be. The ambush was perfectly positioned. I took shrapnel to the leg in the first 30 seconds. And when extraction came, Vaughn made the call to leave me behind. He said it was tactical necessity, but I saw his face when he gave the order. It was not regret I saw. It was satisfaction. Elena's hands clenched into fists. He tried to have you killed. He tried to have me eliminated, Caldwell corrected. Whether I died from wounds or Taliban capture did not matter to him. Either way, I would stop asking questions about where the money was going. Outside the room, Elena could hear voices. Raised voices. Someone was demanding to be let in. She recognized the tone even before she heard the words. Aggressive. Entitled. Used to getting his way. The door opened and Lieutenant Commander Derek Vaughn entered, flanked by 2 other SEALs. He stopped short when he saw Elena sitting beside Caldwell's bed. His face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Shock, confusion, then carefully controlled neutrality. "Captain Reeves," he said slowly, "this is unexpected. I thought you were dead." Elena stood up and turned to face him. "Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated, Lieutenant Commander. Unlike reports of Commander Caldwell's death, which were completely fabricated." Vaughn's eyes narrowed at Elena's words, but his voice remained calm. "I made a tactical decision based on the situation. Commander Caldwell was critically wounded in a hot zone. Staying would have risked 8 operators for 1 man who appeared to be bleeding out. It was textbook protocol." "Textbook protocol," Elena repeated. "Is that what you call abandoning your commanding officer?" One of the SEALs behind Vaughn shifted uncomfortably. He was younger, maybe 28, with the weathered look of someone who had seen multiple deployments. His name tape read Patterson. He looked at Caldwell in the hospital bed, then at Vaughn, and something flickered across his face. "Doubt. You are not their captain," Vaughn said. "You do not get to judge decisions made in combat." "You are right," Elena said. "I was not there. I was 2 kilometers away on a ridgeline watching through a scope. I watched you load 7 men into that helicopter. I watched you lift off while Commander Caldwell was still alive and calling for extraction. I watched you abandon him." The room went completely silent. The second SEAL behind Vaughn, an older operator with Master Chief insignia, stared at Elena with open shock. His name tape read Kowalski. He took a step forward. "You were on Overwatch?" he asked. "Why were you not on comms? Why do we not know you were there?" "Because I do not exist," Elena said simply. "Officially, I have been dead for 6 years. Unofficially, I have been tracking Taliban movements in this sector for 3 weeks. I had eyes on your entire operation." Vaughn's careful control slipped for just a moment. His jaw clenched and his hand moved unconsciously toward his sidearm before he caught himself. "That is impossible. Our operation was classified. No other assets were briefed." "Which raises an interesting question," Elena said. "How did the Taliban know exactly where to hit you? How did they have fighters in perfect ambush position? Someone told them you were coming, Lieutenant Commander. Someone gave them your route and your timing." Vaughn's face flushed red. "You are accusing me of treason? You are insane. Security leaks happen. Intelligence gets compromised. It does not mean there was intentional betrayal." Caldwell spoke from his bed, his voice weak but clear. 3 weeks ago, I discovered financial irregularities in our unit budget. Equipment purchases that never arrived. Fuel allocations for missions that never happened. When I started asking questions, you told me to drop it. You said it would cause problems for everyone." Patterson and Kowalski both turned to look at Vaughn. Patterson's hand had moved closer to his own sidearm. Kowalski's expression had gone from shock to barely controlled anger. "Sir," Patterson said quietly. "Is that true?" Vaughn spun to face his man. "This is ridiculous. The commander is on pain medication. He is confused. And this woman is a ghost who should have stayed dead. None of this is admissible. None of this matters." "It matters to me," Kowalski said. His voice was hard as stone. "I have been on your team for 4 years, Lieutenant Commander. I have followed your orders into some of the worst hellholes on this planet. And you're telling me that when our commander went down, you just left him?" "I made the only call I could make," Vaughn insisted. "The math was simple. 8 lives versus 1. 8 operators who could fight another day versus 1 dying officer. That is command. That is leadership. That is murder," Elena said. "You left him to die because he was investigating you. You gambled that the Taliban would finish what you started. The only problem was I was there. And I do not gamble with lives." Vaughn turned back to Elena, and this time there was no pretense of control. Pure hatred blazed in his eyes. "You have no authority here. You have no rank. You have no right to question my decisions. You are a dead woman walking around pretending to be relevant." The door opened, and Colonel Morrison entered with Chun and 2 military police officers. Morrison looked at Vaughn with cold assessment. "Lieutenant Commander Vaughn, you are hereby ordered to surrender your sidearm and submit to immediate investigation. Charges pending include dereliction of duty, attempted murder of a superior officer, and misappropriation of government funds." Vaughn's face went white. This is insane. I saved my team. I brought my men home. You cannot charge me for doing my job. Your job was to bring all your men home, Morrison said, including your commanding officer. Captain Reeves' testimony, combined with Commander Caldwell's statement, gives us more than enough cause for investigation. MP secures weapon. Vaughn looked at Patterson and Kowalski. His eyes were wild now, desperate. You know me. You have fought beside me. Tell them this is wrong. Patterson stepped forward and unclipped Vaughn's holster himself. His movements were careful, professional, but his voice was thick with disgust. I followed you, sir, because I thought you were a good officer. I thought you care about the men. But if you left the commander to die, if you put us all at risk because of money, then I do not know you at all. Kowalski said nothing. He just turned his back on Vaughn and walked to Caldwell's bedside. He stood at attention and saluted. The gesture was simple, but it carried weight. It was a statement of loyalty, of where his allegiance truly lay. The MPs escorted Vaughn from the room. As he passed Elena, he stopped and leaned close. His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried venom. This is not over. You have no idea what you have started. There are people above me who will make sure you disappear for good this time. Elena met his gaze without flinching. I have been dead for 6 years. I got pretty good at it. But you should know something, Lieutenant Commander. The people you work for, the ones pulling your strings, they do not protect failures. And you just failed spectacularly. Vaughn was pulled away and the door closed behind him. Morrison turned to Elena and gestured toward the hall. We need your full statement, Captain. Everything you saw, everything you know. And we need to understand why you were operating in this sector without authorization. Elena nodded, but looked at Caldwell first. The commander was pale and exhausted, but his eyes were clear. He gave her a small nod of thanks. She returned it and followed Morrison into the hall. They walked through the base hospital corridor. Medical personnel moved past them with practiced efficiency. Somewhere a phone was ringing. The normal sounds of a military hospital doing its work. But Elena knew nothing about this situation was normal. Vaughn's final words echoed in her mind. There are people above me. She had been operating in shadows long enough to know how deep military corruption could run. A lieutenant commander skimming funds was small time. But if he had protection from higher up the chain, if there were flag officers involved, then this was bigger than one crooked seal. Chen walked beside her, his expression thoughtful. Your timing was remarkably convenient, Captain. 3 weeks of surveillance in the exact sector where Commander Caldwell's team was operating. The exact night he was ambushed. Some might call that suspicious. Some might, Elena agreed. But I've been tracking Taliban supply routes through that valley for a month. I identified a major weapons cache 2 ridge lines over. I was planning my approach when I picked up radio chatter about an American team in the area. When I heard the ambush start, I moved to overwatch position. What I saw convinced me something was wrong beyond a simple security leak. What specifically? Chen asked. The Taliban fighters were not trying to capture or interrogate, Elena said. They were executing wounded. I saw them finish off 2 Afghan interpreters who were hit in the initial contact. Standard procedure for them would be to take prisoners for intelligence value. But they were killing everyone. It felt less like an ambush and more like a cleanup operation. Morrison stopped walking. You are suggesting the Taliban were hired to eliminate the entire team? I am suggesting someone wanted Commander Caldwell dead and did not care about collateral damage, Elena replied. The fact that Vaughn conveniently made it out with most of his team while the commander was left behind seems less like tactics and more like orchestration. They reached a conference room, and Chun held the door open. Inside, a stenographer was already set up with recording equipment. This would be official now. On the record, every word documented and entered into evidence. Elena took a seat at the table and looked at the recording equipment. For 6 years, she had operated with complete deniability. No records, no trail, no proof she existed. This statement would change everything. It would confirm she was alive. It would expose her operations. It would make her a target for everyone who benefited from thinking she was dead. But it would also protect Caldwell. It would expose Vaughn and whoever was protecting him. It would bring light to the shadows where corruption festered. She thought about the oath she had taken when she joined the Marines, to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Domestic enemies were harder to fight. They hid behind ranks and regulations. They used the system meant to protect as a weapon to destroy. But they could still be beaten. They could still be exposed. Ready when you're a captain, Chan said, settling into his chair across from her. Elena took a breath and began to speak. Elena spoke for 3 hours straight. She detailed every observation from the ridgeline, the exact positions of Taliban fighters, the radio intercepts she had monitored. The way Vaughn's team had loaded the helicopter with what appeared to be carefully rehearsed efficiency while their commander bled out 50 meters away. Chin took notes. Morrison listened with his jaw clenched. The stenographer's fingers moved steadily across the keys. When Elena finished, the room fell silent. Chin closed his notebook and leaned back in his chair. He looked tired, older somehow than when they had started. "You realize what you are alleging," he said quietly. "You are suggesting a conspiracy that reaches beyond Lieutenant Commander Vaughn. You are implying that senior officers may be involved in operations designed to eliminate one of their own commanders." "I am not implying anything," Elena said. "I am stating facts. Someone told the Taliban exactly where to be. Someone arranged for Caldwell to be on that mission despite his investigation into financial irregularities. Someone made sure he was in the kill zone when the ambush happened. Vaughn pulled the trigger by leaving him behind, but he was not working alone." Morrison stood and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was climbing higher. Another day in Afghanistan. Another day of operations and briefings and the machinery of war grinding forward. He spoke without turning around. 6 months ago, a logistics officer at Kandahar flagged unusual supply requisitions. Weapons and ammunition being shipped to forward operating bases that did not exist on any official maps. When he pushed for answers, he was reassigned to a desk job in Germany. 2 months ago, an intelligence analyst noticed pattern anomalies in strike reports. Enemy casualties being inflated. Success rates that did not match ground truth. She was transferred stateside before she could file her report. "So this has been going on for a while," Elena said. Morrison turned to face her. "We have suspected for over a year that someone is running unauthorized operations and skimming resources. But every time we get close to identifying who, the investigation gets shut down from above, or the investigator gets reassigned, or evidence disappears." Chin opened his folder and pulled out a photograph. He slid it across the table to Elena. It showed a man in his late 50s wearing the stars of a brigadier general. His face was hard and weathered. His eyes were cold. "Do you recognize this man?" Chin asked. Elena studied the photograph. Something about the face was familiar, but she could not place it. She shook her head. "Brigadier General Marcus Sutton," Chin said, "currently assigned to Special Operations Command. Before that, he ran logistics for JSOC. Before that, he was a colonel commanding special operations units in Iraq and Afghanistan. He has his hands in every pie that matters, and he is very good at making problems disappear." "You think he is behind this," Elena said. "We think he is a possibility," Morrison replied. "But we have no proof. Nothing that would survive a court-martial. And he has friends in very high places. People who would protect him. People who benefit from the operations he runs." Elena looked at the photograph again. Then she remembered. A briefing room in Helmand Province. 6 years ago. She had been a captain then, still officially alive, still operating with her Marine unit. A general had visited to discuss sniper operations. He had been dismissive of her presence, suggested that women had no place in combat roles. She had ignored him and done her job. But she remembered his face now, and his name. "I met him once," Elena said. "Helmand Province, 2017. He came to brief our unit. He was not happy about having a female sniper in the room. 2 months after that visit, you were declared killed in action," Chin noted. "Care to explain the connection?" Elena's blood went cold. The mission that supposedly killed her. The classified operation that went wrong. The explosion that left no recoverable remains. She had always assumed it was legitimate combat losses. Bad intelligence. Wrong place at the wrong time. But what if it had been intentional? What if Sutton had decided she was a problem and arranged for her elimination? The mission that killed me was a targeted strike on a Taliban compound, she said slowly. Intelligence suggested a high-value target was present. My team was sent in to provide overwatch. But when we arrived, the compound was empty. Then mortars started falling. We scattered. The building I was in took a direct hit. When I came to, I was buried in rubble. It took me 6 hours to dig myself out. And you never reported back, Morrison said. I tried, Elena replied. I made my way to an extraction point, but when I called in, I was told my unit had already been extracted and I was listed as Kia. The voice on the radio told me that sometimes it was better to stay dead. That if I came back, I would just be asking questions that no one wanted to answer. I was young and scared and injured. So I disappeared. Chun and Morrison exchanged a long look. Morrison ran his hand through his gray hair. Sutton was the operations officer who authorized that mission, he said quietly. He selected the target. He provided the intelligence. And he signed off on the casualty report that declared you dead. So he tried to kill me 6 years ago, Elena said. And when I survived, I became a ghost. A ghost he could not control. A ghost who has been operating in his backyard ever since. The pieces were falling into place now. Ugly pieces that formed an uglier picture. Sutton running unauthorized operations for profit. Skimming military resources. Selling weapons and intelligence. When people got too close to the truth, he eliminated them. Caldwell had been asking questions about money. So Sutton arranged for him to die in combat. Elena had been asking questions 6 years ago. So Sutton tried the same solution. But both times the target survived. Both times his clean solutions became messy problems. The door opened, and a young lieutenant entered. He handed Morrison a tablet and left quickly. Morrison read it, and his face went pale. He showed it to Chun, who cursed under his breath. What? Elena asked. Vaughn posted bail 2 hours ago, Morrison said. Someone put up $500,000 to get him out of the brig pending trial. And security footage shows he left the base in a vehicle with diplomatic plates. Diplomatic plates, Elena repeated. That makes no sense. He is active duty military. It makes perfect sense if someone very powerful want him out of our reach, Chin said. Diplomatic immunity would prevent us from pursuing him through normal channels. And if that someone is Sutton, he just lost his scapegoat and gained a massive liability. You think Sutton will eliminate Vaughn, Elena said. I think Vaughn knows too much and is now a loose end, Chin replied. And Sutton does not leave loose ends. Elena stood up. We need to find Vaughn before Sutton does. If he dies, any testimony he might provide dies with him. And Sutton walks away clean. Morrison shook his head. Vaughn is in the wind. We have no jurisdiction if he left under diplomatic protection. And even if we found him, what makes you think he would testify against Sutton? The man is facing life in prison. He has nothing to gain by cooperating. He has his life to gain, Elena said. If we can offer him protection and a deal, he might talk. But we need to move fast. Chun gathered his files. I will reach out to my contacts. See if we can track which embassy provided those diplomatic plates. Morrison, you coordinate with base security. Pull all footage from the last 3 hours. Find out who Vaughn met with and where they went. And what do I do? Elena asked. Morrison looked at her with something approaching sympathy. You stay here. You're still technically a ghost. You have no official status, no authority, no protection. If Sutton knows you are alive and talking, you become his next target. I have been his target for 6 years, Elena said. I am still here. You have been a ghost for 6 years, Morrison corrected. Hidden. The moment you stepped on that helicopter with Caldwell, you became visible. And visible targets are much easier to eliminate. Elena wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. For 6 years, she had survived by staying in shadows, by being no one and nowhere. Now she was someone. She was a witness. She was testimony. She was evidence of crimes that powerful people wanted buried. And that made her expendable. A knock on the door interrupted them. An MP entered and saluted Morrison. Sir, Commander Caldwell is asking for Captain Reeves. He says it is urgent. Morrison nodded. Go, but stay on base. Do not leave secured areas. And do not trust anyone outside this room. Elena followed the MP back to the hospital. Her mind was racing. Sutton had tried to kill her once. Now she had exposed his operation and implicated him in attempted murder of a senior officer. He would not let that stand. He would come for her. The only question was how and when. She reached Caldwell's room and found him sitting up in bed. His color was better. The 4 fluids and blood transfusions were working. But his expression was grim. Patterson and Kowalski stood on either side of his bed like sentries. "They let Vaughn go," Caldwell said. "No explanation. No hearing. Just released him into custody of persons unknown." "I know," Elena said. "We think Sutton arranged it." Caldwell nodded slowly. "Then we have a bigger problem than I thought. Because Sutton does not just have friends in high places. He has friends in dangerous places. People who make problems disappear permanently." Elena met his eyes. "Are you saying I am in danger?" "I am saying we are all in danger," Caldwell replied. "Anyone who knows about this. Anyone who can testify. Sutton has spent years building his operation. He will not let it fall apart because of one failed ambush." Patterson spoke up. "Sir, my team has your back. We made mistakes. We should have questioned Vaughn's orders. We should have insisted on extracting you. But we are with you now. All the way." Kowalski nodded agreement. The Master Chief's weathered face was set with determination. "We protect our own, and you are our commander. That has not changed." Caldwell looked at his men with obvious emotion. Then he looked at Elena. "You saved my life. You exposed corruption that would have continued unchecked. But now you are exposed too, and that makes you vulnerable." "I can handle myself," Elena said. "Against Taliban fighters, yes," Caldwell agreed. "But against a general with unlimited resources and no conscience? That is a different kind of war." The attack came at 0300 hours. Elena was in temporary quarters on the base, sleeping light the way she had learned to do in 6 years of operating alone. The first indication of trouble was the sound of suppressed gunfire from the corridor outside. She was out of bed and armed before her conscious mind fully registered the threat. She moved to the door and listened. 2 shooters, maybe 3. Professional, moving with tactical precision. Not Taliban, not insurgents. These were trained operators, the kind Sutton would send. Her window faced the interior courtyard. 3 stories up. No easy escape route. She grabbed her gear bag and moved to the bathroom. The ventilation duct was narrow, but she had squeezed through tighter spaces. She pulled the grate free and climbed inside, just as her door exploded inward. She heard them enter, heard them clear the room, heard the team leader speak into his radio in clipped professional tones. "Target not present. Expanding search." Elena crawled through the duct system, moving toward the building's central shaft. Her shoulders scraped against metal. Her breathing was controlled and quiet. Behind her, she heard more doors being kicked in, more rooms being searched. They were systematic, thorough. Eventually, they would realize where she had gone. She reached a junction and dropped down into a maintenance corridor. Alarms were sounding now. The base was waking up to the intrusion. But that might not help her. If Sutton had enough pull to spring Vaughn with diplomatic immunity, he might have enough pull to explain away a hit team on an active military base. She needed to reach Morrison or Chun, someone with authority who could lock down the base and protect the evidence. But her phone was back in her room. Her radio, too. She was cut off and alone. A figure stepped out of the shadows ahead, and Elena's weapon came up. Then she recognized the face. Kowalski. The Master Chief held up one hand in a calming gesture. "Easy, Captain. Friendly. How did you find me?" Elena asked, not lowering her weapon. "Patterson and I were pulling security on Commander Caldwell. We saw the hit team move past toward your quarters. Figured you would go to ground and head for the maintenance areas. Old habits from breaching training. Always know where the vents and service corridors are." Elena lowered her weapon slightly. "Where's Caldwell?" "Secure. We moved him to a classified medical facility on base. Somewhere these assholes will not find him. Patterson is with him now. I can't find you." "There are at least 3 shooters," Elena said. "Professional grade. They're searching systematically." "For shooters," Kowalski corrected. "I already took one down. Quietly. The other 3 do not know yet, but they will figure it out soon." Elena studied the Master Chief. He was calm, professional, a man who had been in bad situations before and survived them. She made a decision and nodded. We need to get to Morrison. Warn him that Sutton is moving against us directly. Kowalski gestured down the corridor. This way. I know a route that avoids the main areas. But we need to move fast. Base security is responding, but they do not know who the friendlies are yet. In the confusion, these shooters could complete their mission and exfil before anyone realizes what happened. They moved through the maintenance corridors in tactical formation. Kowalski took point. Elena covered their 6. The base alarms continued to wail. Somewhere in the distance, she heard shouting and the sound of boots on concrete. The shooters were being pressed now. That made them more dangerous, not less. Corner professionals were unpredictable. They reached a stairwell and started down. 2 flights from the ground floor, Elena heard movement below. She held up a fist, and Kowalski froze. Footsteps, multiple sets, coming up fast. The hit team had anticipated their route. Of course they had. These were not amateurs. They had studied the base layout, identified the likely escape routes, set up to intercept. Elena pulled a flashbang from her vest. Kowalski saw it and nodded. They had operated together for less than 12 hours, but there was already an understanding between them. The kind of understanding that came from shared purpose and mutual respect. She pulled the pin and let the spoon fly. Then she tossed it down the stairwell, and they both turned away and covered their ears. The explosion was deafening in the enclosed space. Before the echo faded, they were moving down the stairs, weapons up. 2 shooters were down, temporarily blinded and disoriented. Elena put them both down with controlled pairs to center mass. Kowalski cleared the landing. 1 more shooter emerged from the ground floor entrance, and Kowalski engaged. 3 rounds. The shooter went down. They exited the stairwell into chaos. Base security was everywhere. Someone was shouting orders. The lights were on full now, the entire installation on high alert. Elena and Kowalski moved toward the operations center where Morrison would be coordinating the response. They made it 50 meters before a voice stopped them cold. Stand down. Drop your weapons. Elena turned slowly. A full colonel she did not recognize stood behind them with 4 armed MPs. The colonel's sidearm was drawn and aimed at them. His expression was hard and certain. You are both under arrest for assault on base personnel. Drop your weapons now, or we will fire. Colonel, Kowalski said carefully, we were defending ourselves against an unauthorized hit team. Check the bodies in the stairwell. Those are not military personnel. I know exactly who they are, the colonel said. They're CIA contractors conducting authorized operations. You just killed 3 federal agents. Now drop your weapons before this gets worse. Elena felt her stomach drop. Sutton had not just sent a hit team. He had sent them with official cover. CIA contractors on an authorized operation. Anyone who killed them would be guilty of murdering federal agents. It was elegant, brutal, and completely effective. She lowered her weapons slowly to the ground. Kowalski did the same. The MPs moved forward and secured them both. The colonel holstered his sidearm and pulled out his phone. Secure the area, he ordered the MPs. No one in or out. And get these 2 to a holding cell. General Sutton wants to speak with them personally. Of course he does, Elena said quietly. The colonel looked at her with cold assessment. You should have stayed dead, Captain Reeves. Coming back to life was your first mistake. Your second was thinking you could expose operations above your pay grade. And your third was killing people who work for someone a lot more powerful than you. They were taken to the base detention facility. Separate cells. Elena sat on the metal bench and assessed her situation. It was bad. Sutton had outmaneuvered them completely. He had sent the hit team. When that failed, he had arranged for them to be arrested for defending themselves. Now he had them isolated and under his control. Morrison and Shin would be looking for them. But if Sutton had a colonel on base following his orders, he probably had other pieces in place too. The investigation might be shut down before it gained momentum. The evidence might disappear. Caldwell might have an unfortunate accident in his recovery, and Elena would be back to being officially dead. Except this time it would be permanent. The cell door opened 2 hours later. General Marcus Sutton walked in alone. He wore his uniform perfectly. His stars gleamed. His bearing was erect and confident. He looked at Elena the way someone might look at a problem that refused to stay solved. "Captain Reeves," he said, "you have caused me considerable difficulty." "Good," Elena replied. Sutton smiled thinly. 6 years ago, you were supposed to die in Helmand Province. The mission was carefully arranged. The target was selected specifically to put you in the wrong place at the wrong time. When you survived and disappeared, I assumed you had learned your lesson, that you would stay hidden and stay quiet. But I did not, Elena said. I kept operating. I kept getting in your way. You killed 47 of my assets, Sutton said calmly. People I had spent years cultivating. Taliban commanders who were on my payroll. ISIS cell leaders who moved my weapons. Al-Qaeda financiers who laundered my money. Every single one of them you eliminated with your sniper rifle and your stubborn sense of justice. Elena felt the pieces fall into final place. The high-value targets she had been eliminating were not just enemies of the United States. They were business partners in Sutton's criminal empire. She had been unknowingly waging war against his operation for 6 years. "You are a traitor," she said. "I am a realist," Sutton corrected. "These wars are not about freedom or democracy. They are about money and power. I simply chose to get my share, and I was very good at it until you decided to resurrect yourself and save Commander Caldwell." "So what now?" Elena asked. "You kill me and everyone who knows about your operation?" Sutton sat down across from her. His expression was almost sad. "I do not want to kill you, Captain. You are a remarkable operator. Skilled, dedicated, exactly the kind of soldier I need. I am offering you a choice. Join me. Use your skills for something more profitable than patriotism. Or refuse and face a court-martial for killing 3 CIA contractors. You will spend the rest of your life in Leavenworth if you are lucky. More likely, you will be executed for treason." Elena looked at the general who had tried to kill her 6 years ago. The man who had corrupted the military from within. The man who was offering her a choice between betrayal and death. She thought about Caldwell lying in a hospital bed with a shattered leg. She thought about Patterson and Kowalski, who had chosen loyalty over orders. She thought about the oath she had taken to defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Then she smiled. "You made a mistake, General. You should have killed me when you had the chance." Sutton's expression hardened at Elena's words. He stood and walked to the cell door. Before he left, he looked back at her one final time. "You have until morning to reconsider. After that, the paperwork will be filed. CIA contractors killed in the line of duty by a rogue Marine officer. Court-martial proceedings will begin within the week. Think carefully about your choice, Captain. Pride is a poor companion in a federal prison." The door closed with a heavy metallic clang. Elena was alone again. She stood and examined the cell methodically. Concrete walls. Stale door. Camera in the corner with a blinking red light. No obvious weaknesses. No easy escape. Sutton had her exactly where he wanted her. But he had made assumptions. He assumed she was isolated. He assumed Morrison and Chun had been neutralized. He assumed Caldwell was vulnerable. And he assumed Elena had not planned for exactly this scenario. 6 years of operating alone had taught her to always have a backup plan. Always have leverage. Always have one card left to play. She had given Morrison and Chun enough information before the attack. They would know what to do with it. And Kowalski had gotten Caldwell to safety. That meant there were still pieces on the board. Still moves to be made. She sat back on the bench and closed her eyes. Not to sleep. To wait. To conserve energy for what came next. Because something would come next. It always did. 3 hours later, the lights went out. Not just in her cell. Throughout the entire detention facility. Emergency lighting kicked in after a few seconds, bathing everything in red. Then that went out too. Complete darkness. Elena was on her feet, immediately moving to the door by memory and touch. She heard the electronic lock disengage with a soft click. The door swung open. A voice spoke from the darkness. "Patterson. Captain, we need to move. Now." She followed the sound of his voice into the corridor. Her eyes adjusted to the darkness. Patterson was there with 2 other SEALs she did not recognize. Night vision goggles. suppressed weapons, full tactical kit. They moved with the practiced silence of operators who had done this 1,000 times. "How did you get me out?" Elena asked quietly. "Master Chief called in some favors," Patterson replied. "Turns out a lot of people on this base are not happy with General Sutton. And when they heard what he tried to do to Commander Caldwell, they decided it was time to pick a side. They moved through darkened corridors. The SEALs had mapped out a route that avoided security checkpoints and camera coverage. Someone had done their homework. Someone with access to base infrastructure and security protocols. They emerged into the night air through a maintenance exit. A vehicle was waiting. Kowalski was behind the wheel. Caldwell was in the back seat, his injured leg propped up awkwardly. His face was pale, but his eyes were alert. "Get in," Kowalski said. "We have maybe 10 minutes before they realize you are gone and lock down the base." Elena climbed into the vehicle. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere Sutton cannot reach," Caldwell replied. "Morrison and Chun have arranged safe transport out of Afghanistan. They're working on building a case against Sutton, but they need time. Time we buy by getting you out of his reach." The vehicle moved through the base at normal speed. Not rushing, not drawing attention, just another military vehicle on a base full of them. They reached the flight line, where a C-130 cargo plane sat with engines running. Morrison stood at the base of the ramp. They approached, and Morrison gestured urgently. "Hurry. I can only hold the tower for so long before someone higher up countermand my authority." Elena helped Caldwell out of the vehicle. The commander leaned heavily on her shoulder. Kowalski and Patterson flanked them, weapons ready. They moved up the ramp and into the cargo hold of the aircraft. Morrison followed them up. The loadmaster secured the ramp, and the plane began to taxi immediately. Elena found a seat along the wall and strapped in. Caldwell settled beside her with a grimace of pain. Morrison took a seat across from them. "Where is Chun?" Elena asked. "Still on base," Morrison replied. "Someone needs to stay behind and keep the investigation alive. And someone needs to make sure Sutton does not destroy all the evidence." Chun volunteered to be that someone. The plane lifted off and banked hard to the east. Elena watched through the small window as Bagram Airfield fell away below. She thought about Chun still down there, fighting a war against corruption from inside the system. It was dangerous work, maybe more dangerous than anything she had done in 6 years. Morrison pulled out a satellite phone and handed it to Elena. "You need to call someone. Someone who can take the information we have gathered and go public with it. Someone Sutton cannot intimidate or silence." "Who did you have in mind?" Elena asked. Morrison smiled grimly. "I was thinking about that reporter who broke the story about Abu Ghraib. The one who does not back down when the military tells him to. His name is Michael Chun. No relation to our Chun, but just as stubborn." Elena took the phone, but hesitated. Going public meant admitting she was alive. It meant exposing 6 years of unauthorized operations. It meant becoming a target not just for Sutton, but for everyone who benefited from the current system. Caldwell must have seen her hesitation. He put his hand on her arm. "You already saved my life once. Now save it again by making sure Sutton does not get away with this. The truth needs to come out. All of it." Elena nodded and dialed the number Morrison provided. A voice answered on the third ring. Gruff. Suspicious. Exactly what she expected from someone who made a career of exposing military corruption. "This is Michael Chun." "Who is this?" "My name is Captain Elena Reeves, United States Marine Corps. I was declared killed in action 6 years ago, but I'm very much alive. And I have information about a general who is running a criminal empire using military resources." There was a long pause. Then Chun, the reporter, spoke again, his voice sharp with interest. "I am listening." Elena spent the next hour telling him everything. Sutton's operation, the unauthorized strikes, the Taliban commanders on his payroll, the attempt on her life 6 years ago, the attempt on Caldwell's life 3 days ago, the financial irregularities, the missing equipment, all of it. When she finished, Chun was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke. "I need documentation. I need evidence. I need something more than testimony, or this dies as soon as Sutton's lawyers get involved." Morrison leaned forward. "We have copies of financial records." Chun, our Chun, secured them before we left. We have radio intercepts of Vaughn coordinating with Taliban fighters. We have satellite imagery showing weapons transfers to locations controlled by Sutton's assets. And we have sworn statements from multiple witnesses. Send it all to me, the reporter said. Encrypted. I will verify it independently, and if it checks out, I will run with it. But you need to understand something. Once this goes public, there is no taking it back. Every enemy Sutton has made over his career will come after you. Every person who profited from his operation will want you silenced. You will be fighting for the rest of your lives. We are already fighting, Elena said. We just want to fight in the light instead of the shadows. The reporter made a sound that might have been approval. All right then, send me what you have. I will make sure the world knows what General Marcus Sutton really is. Morrison ended the call and pulled out a laptop. He started uploading files through a secure connection. Elena watched the progress bar creep forward. Each percentage point was another piece of evidence being transmitted. Another nail in Sutton's coffin. Kowalski appeared from the cockpit. Pilot says we are crossing into Pakistani airspace. We will be landing at a NATO base in 2 hours. From there we transfer to a military transport heading stateside. Stateside, Caldwell repeated. I have not been home in 18 months. None of us are going home, Morrison said without looking up from his laptop. Not until this is finished. Sutton has resources in the States too. He has allies. He has people who will protect him. We need to stay mobile and stay unpredictable. The plane hit turbulence, and Elena gripped the armrests. She looked around the cargo hold. Morrison working on the laptop. Caldwell pale and injured but determined. Kowalski and Patterson checking their weapons. These were good people. People who had chosen to stand against corruption even when it cost them everything. Patterson caught her looking and gave a small nod. No words needed. Just acknowledgement of shared purpose. They were in this together now. All of them against a general with unlimited resources and no conscience. The upload finished. Morrison closed the laptop and looked at Elena. It is done. Everything we have is now in the hands of a reporter who specializes in exposing military corruption. Within 48 hours, this will be front-page news. Every major outlet will pick it up. Sutton will not be able to bury it. And then what? Elena asked. Then we testify, Morrison replied. We go on record. We face whatever consequences come from our unauthorized actions. We trust that the system, broken as it is, still has enough integrity to prosecute a corrupt general. That is a lot of trust, Kowalski observed. It is, Morrison agreed. But what choice do we have? We can hide and let Sutton win. Or we can fight and maybe, just maybe, we can fix something that has been broken for too long. Elena looked out the window again. Dawn was breaking over the mountains. The sun was rising on a new day. Somewhere below, Sutton was probably just learning that she had escaped. He would be angry. He would mobilize his resources. He would come after them with everything he had. But they had made their choice. They had chosen light over darkness, truth over lies, justice over survival, and they would see it through to the end. The safe house was a nondescript building in Northern Virginia, 40 minutes from the Pentagon. Morrison had arranged it through contacts who operated outside official channels. People who understood that sometimes the right thing required working around the system rather than through it. Elena stood at the window watching the street below. 48 hours since they had sent the evidence to the reporter. 48 hours of waiting for the story to break. 48 hours of knowing Sutton was out there planning his response. Caldwell sat at the kitchen table with his leg elevated. The base doctors had done good work, but he would need surgery stateside to fully repair the damage. He was reviewing documents on a laptop, building the case they would present when the time came. Morrison entered from the basement where he had set up a secure communications center. His expression was grim. Shin called for Bagram. Sutton has locked down the base. Anyone associated with our investigation is being reassigned or detained. Shin himself is being held for questioning about unauthorized release of classified information. He is a DIA officer, Elena said. They cannot just detain him without cause. They can if a general claims national security is at risk, Morrison replied. And Sutton is claiming exactly that. He is saying we stole classified information and leaked it to compromise ongoing operations. He is painting us as the criminals. Caldwell looked up from his laptop. What about the reporter? Had he verified the evidence? Is he going to run with the story? Morrison pulled out his phone and played a voicemail on speaker. The reporter's voice filled the room. This is Michael Chun. I have verified your evidence through independent sources. Financial records match DoD databases. Radio intercepts are authenticated. Satellite imagery is genuine. This story is solid. It goes live tomorrow morning across every major news outlet. But you need to know something. Sutton knows it is coming. His lawyers sent cease and desist orders. His allies in Congress are calling my editors demanding we kill the story. The pressure is enormous. But we are running it anyway. Be ready. The fallout is going to be massive. The voicemail ended. The room was silent. Elena felt her pulse quicken. This was it. The point of no return. Once that story went live, everything would change. Sutton would be exposed. But so would they. Every unauthorized operation Elena had conducted. Every regulation Morrison had bent. Every order Kowalski and Patterson had disobeyed. All of it would be public record. Kowalski entered from the front room where he had been on watch. Someone just pulled up outside. Black SUV. Government plates. 3 men getting out. Morrison moved to the window and looked down. His jaw clenched. That is Assistant Director Marks from the FBI. If he is here, it means the Bureau is getting involved. Is that good or bad? Patterson asked. Depends on whether Sutton got to them first. Morrison replied. There was a knock at the door. Firm. Authoritative. The knock of someone who expected compliance. Kowalski and Patterson took positions flanking the door, hands near their sidearms. Morrison took a breath and opened it. Assistant Director Marks stood in the hallway. He was in his 50s with iron gray hair and eyes that had seen too much corruption to be easily fooled. 2 agents stood behind him. Their expressions were neutral, but their body language was alert. Colonel Morrison, Marks said, I am here to take statements from everyone in this location regarding allegations of criminal activity by a senior military officer. Come in, Morrison said, stepping aside. Marks and his agents entered. They took in the scene with professional assessment. Caldwell injured at the table. Elena by the window. Kowalski and Patterson in tactical positions. A team preparing for siege, not surrender. Marks pulled out a badge and held it up for everyone to see. For the record, I am Assistant Director Thomas Marks, FBI Criminal Division. I am here investigating allegations against Brigadier General Marcus Sutton. I understand you have evidence of corruption, fraud, and attempted murder. We do, Morrison said. But before we provide anything, I need to know whose side you are on. Sutton has allies throughout the government. If we give you this evidence and you bury it, people die. Marks looked at him for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and played a recording. It was a phone conversation. One voice was Sutton. The other was a congressman Elena did not recognize. Sutton's voice came through clearly. The investigation needs to be shut down immediately. Morrison and his people have stolen classified information. They are working with a terrorist sympathizer who faked her own death. This is a national security crisis. The congressman's voice responded. What do you need from me, Marcus? I need to make calls. FBI, DOJ, Pentagon. Tell them this investigation is compromised. Tell them the evidence is fabricated. Buy me time to clean this up. Consider it done. The recording ended. Marks put his phone away. That conversation happened 6 hours ago. The congressman involved has already started making those calls. But he made a mistake. He called me personally, and I have been investigating Sutton for 3 years. So when he tried to pressure me to bury this case, I knew everything you told the reporter was true. Elena felt hope flicker for the first time in days. You believe us. I believe the evidence. Marks corrected. I believe financial records that show millions being diverted through shell companies. I believe radio intercepts that prove military personnel were coordinating with enemy combatants. I believe satellite imagery showing weapons being transferred to terrorist organizations. Your testimony just provides context for what the evidence already proves. Caldwell spoke up from the table. What happens now? Do we turn ourselves in? Face court-martial for unauthorized operations? That depends, Mark said. Are you willing to testify against Sutton in federal court? Are you willing to go on record with everything you know? Yes, Caldwell said without hesitation. All of us will testify. Marks nodded. Then I am placing all of you in protective custody. Not arrest. Protection. Sutton has already made 2 attempts to eliminate witnesses. I will not give him a third chance. You will be moved to a secure federal facility until trial proceedings begin. When will that be? Morrison asked. The story breaks in 6 hours, Mark said. Once it goes public, the Pentagon will have no choice but to launch an official investigation. Sutton will be suspended pending review. His access to military resources will be cut off. His ability to threaten witnesses will be severely limited. Limited is not eliminated, Elena observed. No, Marks agreed. He will still have allies. He will still have money. He will still be dangerous. That is why you need federal protection. And that is why we need to move you now. Before he realizes where you are, one of the FBI agents stepped forward with a tablet. We need formal statements from each of you. Everything you witnessed. Everything you know. It needs to be documented and notarized before the story breaks. They spent the next 4 hours giving statements. Elena detailed her 6 years as a ghost operator, the targets she had eliminated without knowing they were Sutton's business partners. Morrison explained the investigation he and Chun had conducted, the financial irregularities they had discovered, the pattern of witnesses being reassigned or silenced. Caldwell described the mission where he was abandoned, Vaughn's decision to leave him behind, the suspicions he had about Sutton's involvement. Kowalski and Patterson testified about what they had witnessed, the orders that did not make sense, the equipment that went missing, the operations that seemed designed more for profit than tactical advantage. By the time they finished, dawn was breaking. Marks reviewed the statements on his tablet and nodded with satisfaction. This is good. This is enough to build a case that will survive any legal challenge. Sutton's lawyers will try to discredit you. They will say you are disgruntled officers with an axe to grind. They will attack your credibility. But the financial evidence does not lie. The radio intercepts do not lie. And when we bring in Vaughn to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence, Sutton's entire operation will collapse. You think Vaughn will flip? Elena asked. He already has, Mark said. We picked him up 2 hours ago at a hotel in Maryland. He was trying to flee the country. When we told him he was facing life in prison for attempted murder and treason, he started talking immediately. He gave us names, dates, locations, everything. He is terrified of Sutton, but he is more terrified of spending the rest of his life in a federal prison. The door opened and another FBI agent entered. He handed Marks a phone. Sir, you need to see this. Marks looked at the screen and his expression darkened. He turned it to face the group. It was a news website. The headline was in bold letters. Decorated general accused of running criminal empire using military resources. Multiple witnesses allege corruption, fraud, attempted murder. Below the headline was a photograph. It showed Sutton in his dress uniform, all his medals and ribbons on display. And beside it was another photograph. Elena in her marine dress blues from 6 years ago. The caption read, Captain Elena Reeves, declared Kia in 2017, resurfaces to expose corruption. The story had broken. It was out there now. Public. Irreversible. The truth had been released, and there was no putting it back. Morrison smiled. It is done. Whatever happens now, at least the truth is out there. Marks looked around the room at each of them. Pack your things. We are moving to the federal facility immediately. As of this moment, you are all material witnesses in what will be the biggest military corruption case in decades. And I intend to make sure every single one of you lives long enough to testify. The federal courthouse in Alexandria was surrounded by media trucks and protesters. Some carried signs supporting the military. Others demanded accountability for corruption. The story had exploded across every news outlet in the country. General Marcus Sutton had become the face of everything wrong with the military-industrial complex. Elena sat in the witness preparation room with Morrison and the federal prosecutors. Through the window, she could see the courthouse steps where reporters were doing live broadcasts. Her photograph was everywhere. The Marine sniper who came back from the dead to expose corruption. It made for compelling television. The lead prosecutor was a woman named Sarah Vega. Sharp, mid-40s. She had built her career prosecuting public corruption cases, and she approached this one with methodical precision. The defense is going to attack your credibility, Vega said. They will focus on your 6 years of unauthorized operations. They will suggest you are unstable, that you went rogue and created this conspiracy theory to justify your actions. You need to be prepared for very personal attacks. I have been shot at by Taliban fighters for 6 years, Elena replied. I think I can handle some lawyers. Vega smiled thinly. Taliban fighters do not have law degrees from Harvard and unlimited resources. Sutton's defense team is the best money can buy. They will twist everything you say. They will make you doubt your own memories. Stay focused on the facts. Answer only what is asked. Do not volunteer information. Morrison leaned forward. What about the physical evidence? The financial records? The radio intercepts? That should be enough to convict him regardless of witness testimony. It would be, Vegas said, if the defense had not filed motions to suppress most of it. They are claiming the evidence was obtained illegally, that Morrison and Chun exceeded their authority, that everything derived from their investigation is fruit of the poisonous tree. Can they do that? Elena asked. They could try, Vega replied. The judge will rule on the motions tomorrow. But even if we lose some evidence, we still have Vaughn's testimony. He is cooperating fully. He has provided details about Sutton's operation that we can verify through other means. Where's Vaughn now? Morrison asked. Protective custody at a separate facility, Vegas said. He is scheduled to testify tomorrow. The defense does not know yet how much he has given us. When he takes the stand, it will be devastating. The door opened, and Agent Marks entered. His expression was troubled. We have a problem. Vaughn's attorney just filed a motion to withdraw his cooperation agreement. He claims his client was coerced and his testimony was given under duress. Vega stood up quickly. That is insane. We have recordings of every interview. There was no coercion. Vaughn volunteered everything. I know, Mark said, but the attorney is claiming psychological pressure. He is saying Vaughn was traumatized by combat and not in his right mind when he agreed to cooperate. It is garbage, but it might work. Elena felt ice in her stomach. Without Vaughn's testimony, the case became much weaker. The physical evidence was being challenged. Her own credibility would be attacked. If Vaughn recanted, Sutton might walk. Someone got to him, Morrison said. Sutton has people on the inside. They threatened him or offered him something. Maybe both. Marks pulled out his phone. I am sending agents to interview Vaughn immediately. If someone made contact, we will find out who. He left the room, making calls. Vega paced beside the window. Her carefully constructed case was falling apart. Elena could see in her posture, in the tension around her eyes. What are our chances without Vaughn? Elena asked. 50-50, Vega admitted. Maybe less. The defense will argue that you have a vendetta against Sutton because he declared you Kia. They will say Morrison is a disgraced officer trying to take down his superiors. Without Vaughn corroborating the details, it becomes he said, she said, and juries tend to believe generals over captains. Then we need to find evidence they cannot challenge, Elena said. Something that proves Sutton's guilt beyond any legal technicality. What did you have in mind? Morrison asked. Elena thought back to her 6 years in the shadows. The operations she had conducted. The targets she had eliminated. Every one of those targets had been coordinating with someone, receiving orders from someone, being paid by someone. The Taliban commanders I killed, she said slowly. They kept records, communications, payment ledgers. When I eliminated them, I never searched their compounds because I was operating alone and needed to exfil quickly. But those compounds might still have evidence. Evidence that ties directly to Sutton. Those compounds are in Afghanistan, Vega pointed out. We cannot just send FBI agents to search Taliban strongholds. No, Elena agreed. But I know people who can. People who operate outside official channels. People who owe me favors. Morrison looked at her sharply. You're talking about going back. Going back to Afghanistan. Not me, Elena said. But I know operators who are still there. still working in the shadows. If I make some calls, they might be willing to recover documents that prove the connection between Sutton and the Taliban. That evidence would be inadmissible, Vega said. Chain of custody would be impossible to establish. Defense would tear it apart. Not if we can verify it through other means, Elena countered. If we recover communications that reference specific bank accounts, we can subpoena those accounts. If we find payment records that match known transactions, we can trace them. The documents themselves might not be admissible, but they can point us toward evidence that is. Vega considered this. Then she nodded. Make your calls. But be careful. If Sutton finds out we are looking for additional evidence, he will move to destroy it. Elena pulled out a secure phone Morrison had provided. She dialed a number she had memorized but never written down. It rang 4 times before a voice answered. Gruff. Suspicious. A voice that belonged to a man who lived in the same shadows she had inhabited. This is Ghost, Elena said. I need a favor. A big one. Ghost is dead, the voice replied. Everyone knows that. Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated, Elena said. And I need help recovering some documents. Documents that could bring down someone who has been profiting from this war for years. There was a long pause. Then the voice spoke again. What kind of documents and where? Elena spent 20 minutes explaining what she needed. The locations of 3 compounds where she had eliminated Taliban commanders. The types of records to look for. The urgency of the situation. When she finished, the voice was quiet for a moment. This is dangerous work, he finally said. Going into those compounds now, 6 years later, the Taliban will have them heavily watched. They know someone was hunting their commanders. They will be ready for anyone who comes looking. I know, Elena said. I would not ask if it was not critical. This general has killed American soldiers. He has armed our enemies. He has betrayed everything we fight for. And he is about to walk free unless we can prove what he did. Another pause. Then the voice spoke with finality. I will make it happen. Give me 72 hours. If the documents exist, I will get them. Thank you, Elena said. Do not thank me yet, the voice replied. If this goes wrong, we are both dead, along with everyone helping us. The call ended. Elena put the phone down and looked at Vega and Morrison. They both understood what she had just set in motion. An unauthorized operation on foreign soil. Operators going into Taliban-controlled territory without official sanction. If it succeeded, they might save the case. If it failed, people would die and the case would collapse anyway. 72 hours, Elena said. That is how long we need to stall the trial. Vega shook her head. The trial starts in 48 hours. I can file motions. I can create delays. But I can buy you maybe 24 extra hours at most. Then it will have to be enough, Morrison said. The door opened again and Marks returned. His face was ashen. Vaughn is dead. He was found in his cell 20 minutes ago. Apparent suicide. Hung himself with a bedsheet. The room went silent. Elena felt the words hit her like a physical blow. Vaughn had been a traitor and a coward, but he had also been their star witness. The one person who could directly testify to Sutton's orders and operations. And now he was gone. It was not suicide, Elena said quietly. Sutton had him killed. Marks nodded. I know, but proving it will be nearly impossible. The facility had cameras, but somehow the one covering Vaughn's cell malfunctioned. The guard who was supposed to check on him every 30 minutes was called away on an emergency. Everything about this screams murder, but we cannot prove it. Vegas sat down heavily. Without Vaughn, we have almost nothing. The judge will likely suppress most of the evidence Morrison and Shin gathered. Your testimony will be attacked as unreliable. Sutton walks. Not if we get those documents from Afghanistan, Elena said. Not if we prove he was paying Taliban commanders. Not if we connect the money directly to American soldiers dying. Morrison looked at her with something like admiration. You are betting everything on operators you have not seen in years. Operators who might be dead or compromised. Operators who have 72 hours to accomplish the impossible. Yes, Elena said simply, because that is all we have left. One last shot. One last chance to make this right. Marks checked his watch. I need to brief the director about Vaughn's death. The media is going to explode when this gets out. They will say we failed to protect a key witness. They will question the entire case. Let them question, Morrison said. We know the truth. And in 72 hours, we will prove it. Elena walked to the window and looked out at the media circus below. Somewhere in this city, Sutton was celebrating. He had eliminated his most dangerous witness. He had his lawyers attacking the evidence. He had his allies in Congress applying pressure. He thought he was winning, but he did not know about the operators heading into Afghanistan. He did not know about the one last card Elena had to play. He did not know that 6 years of operating in shadows had taught her exactly how to fight enemies who thought they were untouchable. The trial was about to begin, and one way or another, the truth would come out. The trial began on a cold morning in February. Elena sat in the witness gallery watching as General Marcus Sutton entered the courtroom. He wore his dress uniform with every medal and ribbon earned over 30 years of service. He looked every inch the decorated war hero. The jury watched him with respect bordering on reverence. His defense team was led by Harold Brennan, a former federal prosecutor who now commanded fees of $1,000 per hour. He was exactly what Elena expected. Confident, polished, dangerous. Vega stood to deliver her opening statement. She walked the jury through the allegations methodically. Financial fraud, weapons trafficking, conspiracy with enemy combatants, attempted murder. Her voice was steady, but Elena could see the tension in her shoulders. Without Vaughn, and with most of the physical evidence under challenge, the case was fragile. When Vega finished, Brennan stood for the defense. He buttoned his suit jacket and addressed the jury with the easy confidence of someone who believed he had already won. Ladies and gentlemen, what you will hear in this trial is a conspiracy theory built on the testimony of disgraced officers and a woman who faked her own death and conducted unauthorized military operations for 6 years. General Sutton is a patriot who has served this country with distinction. He has been targeted by people who resent his success and his dedication to protecting American lives. By the time this trial concludes, you will see this prosecution for what it truly is: a witch hunt. The first witness was Morrison. Vega walked him through his investigation. The financial irregularities he discovered. The pattern of witnesses being silenced. Morrison was calm and professional, but Brennan's cross-examination was brutal. Colonel Morrison, you were passed over for promotion twice, correct? Yes, Morrison admitted. And you blame General Sutton for those failures, do you not? I blame the corruption he represents. Brennan smiled thinly. Or perhaps you blame your own inadequacies and created this elaborate theory to salvage your career. Objection, Vegas said. Argumentative. Sustained, the judge ruled. But the damage was done. Brennan had planted doubt in the jury's minds. Morrison stepped down looking tired and frustrated. The trial continued through the morning. Chin testified via video link from Afghanistan, where he was still being held for questioning. His testimony was solid, but the defense attacked the methods he used to gather evidence. Illegal searches, une autorise de surveillance, compromised chain of custody. By lunch recess, Elena could see the case slipping away. The jury was skeptical. The judge seemed sympathetic to defense motions. Sutton sat at the defense table looking serene and confident. Elena's phone buzzed during the break. A text from an unknown number. Package delivered. Check your email. She opened her secure email on her phone. There was a message with multiple attachments. She downloaded them quickly and began reading. Her pulse quickened with each page. Financial ledgers from a Taliban compound. Payment records showing wire transfers from shell companies Sutton controlled. Communications referencing the American general who provided weapons and intelligence. Dates that match known attacks on U.S. forces. Names of soldiers who had died in ambushes that Sutton's Taliban partners had conducted. The documents were in Pashto, but someone had already translated them. Every page was photographed with metadata showing location and time. The operators had done their job. They had recovered evidence that directly tied Sutton to enemy combatants. Elena found Vega in the prosecutor's conference room. She handed over her phone without a word. Vega read through the documents, her eyes widening with each page. Where did you get these? She demanded. Does it matter? Elena asked. It matters for admissibility. It matters for chain of custody. It matters because a jury needs to know these are genuine. They are genuine, Elena said, and I can prove it. Every financial transaction referenced in those documents can be verified through banking records. Every date matches known attacks. Every name can be cross-referenced. We do not need to use the documents themselves in court. We just need to use them as a roadmap to evidence that is admissible. Vega was already on her phone calling her team. I need forensic accountants immediately. I need every bank account associated with these shell companies subpoenaed. I need DoD records for every attack mentioned in these documents. And I need it all within 24 hours. She hung up and looked at Elena. This could work. If we can verify even half of what is in these documents, we can reopen our case. We can show the jury a pattern that proves Sutton was working with the enemy. The trial resumed that afternoon. Elena was called to the witness stand. She took the oath and sat down, very aware of every eye in the courtroom on her. The jury, the media, Sutton himself, watching her with cold calculation. Vega began gently. Captain Reeves, please tell the jury about the night you saved Commander Caldwell. Elena took a breath and began. She described watching through her scope as the SEAL team abandoned their commander. She described the Taliban fighters closing in. She described making the decision to intervene even though it meant exposing herself. When she finished, Brennan stood for a cross-examination. He approached slowly, like a predator circling prey. Captain Reeves, you claim you have been operating in Afghanistan for 6 years without authorization, correct? Yes. And in those 6 years, you killed 47 people. Is that accurate? Eliminated 47 enemy combatants. Elena corrected. Brennan raised an eyebrow. Enemy combatants, or people General Sutton had identified as enemy combatants. People who were coordinating attacks on American forces. But you had no official orders. Nobu Saschen. You were essentially a vigilante with a sniper rifle. Elena kept her voice level. I was a Marine doing my duty. Your duty? Brennan's voice rose with incredulity. Your duty was to follow orders. Your duty was to operate within the chain of command. Instead, you faked your death and spent 6 years conducting unauthorized killings. And now you expect this jury to believe you are a credible witness? Elena met his eyes. I expect this jury to examine the evidence. Follow the money. See who profited from selling weapons to terrorists while American soldiers died. Brennan turned to the jury. No further questions. This witness has already demonstrated her disregard for truth and protocol. Elena stepped down, feeling the weight of the jury's skepticism. But she also saw Vega on her phone, receiving updates from her team. The forensic accountants were working. The banking records were being subpoenaed. The verification process had begun. The trial recessed for the day. That night, Elena sat with Morrison and Caldwell in the federal safe house, watching news coverage of the trial. Every analyst predicted acquittal. Every legal expert said the prosecution had failed to prove its case. Caldwell's phone rang. He answered, and his expression changed. He put on speaker. It was Marks. We just got confirmation from the Treasury Department. The shell companies referenced in those Taliban documents, they all trace back to accounts controlled by Sutton. The transfers matched down to the penny. We have proof he was paying enemy combatants. The room erupted. Morrison was on his feet. Caldwell was smiling for the first time in weeks. Elena felt relief wash through her like a wave. How fast can we get this to the jury? Vega asked over the phone connection. Tomorrow morning, March replied. I am filing emergency motions tonight. The judge will have to allow it. This is direct evidence of the central charge. Brennan will fight it, Vega warned. Let him fight, Mark said. The evidence is solid. The chain of custody is perfect. Treasury Department verification carries weight that no defense attorney can challenge. Elena walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Sutton was probably celebrating what he thought was his imminent victory. He had buried witnesses, suppressed evidence, attacked credibility. He thought he had won, but he had not counted on Elena's network. He had not counted on operators willing to risk everything to recover documents from Taliban compounds. He had not counted on forensic accountants working through the night to verify financial connections. He had made the same mistake he made 6 years ago when he tried to kill her. He assumed she would stay down. He assumed she would give up. He assumed wrong. The next morning, the courtroom was packed. Word had leaked that major new evidence was being introduced. Vega stood and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, the prosecution has obtained verification from the Treasury Department regarding financial transactions between the defendant and known enemy combatants. We request permission to introduce this evidence and recall our witnesses." Brennan was on his feet immediately. "Objection. This is a transparent attempt to salvage a failed prosecution. The defense has had no opportunity to review this so-called evidence." The judge looked at the documents Vega had provided. His expression grew grave as he read. He looked up at Sutton, then at the jury, then back to the papers. "The objection is overruled. This evidence goes to the heart of the charges. The prosecution may proceed." Vega called Agent Marks to the stand. He testified about the Treasury investigation, about shell companies in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland, about wire transfers totaling $8 million over 5 years, about how every single dollar could be traced back to Sutton and forward to Taliban commanders. The jury was transfixed. This was not theory or speculation. This was documented proof. Numbers that could not be argued with. Transactions that could not be explained away. Brennan tried to cross-examine, but Marks was unshakable. Every question was answered with precise detail. Every challenge was met with documentation. Then Vega played her final card. She called Caldwell to the stand. The commander walked slowly to the witness box, his leg still healing. His silver hair caught the courtroom lights. He took the oath and sat down. "Commander Caldwell," Vega said, "please tell the jury what happened when you started investigating financial irregularities in your unit." Caldwell spoke clearly and without emotion. He detailed discovering missing funds, confronting Vaughn, being told to drop the investigation, and then being abandoned in Afghanistan when the mission went wrong. The jury watched him with rapt attention. This was not a disgraced officer or a vigilante sniper. This was a decorated commander with 30 years of service. And his testimony was devastating. When he finished, even Brennan seemed hesitant to cross-examine. But he tried anyway. The exchange was brief, and Caldwell gave no ground. As Caldwell stepped down, Elena saw something change in the jury. The skepticism was gone. The doubt had evaporated. They believed, they understood, and they were angry. Sutton sat at the defense table, looking smaller somehow. The confident bearing was gone. His medals and ribbons suddenly looked like props in a failed performance. The trial continued for 2 more days, but the outcome was never in doubt. The jury deliberated for 6 hours and returned with a verdict. Guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing took place 3 weeks after the verdict. General Marcus Sutton stood before the judge in civilian clothes. His uniform had been stripped away, his stars removed, his 30 years of service reduced to nothing by his own greed and betrayal. The judge was a former Marine officer herself. She looked at Sutton with undisguised contempt as she read the sentence. Life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Forfeiture of all military benefits and pension. Restitution to the families of soldiers killed in attacks he facilitated. Sutton showed no emotion as he was led away in shackles. But as he passed Elena in the gallery, he looked at her one final time. His eyes held hatred, but also something else. Resignation. The understanding that he had been beaten by someone he underestimated. Elena watched him disappear through the courtroom doors and felt nothing but emptiness. Justice had been served, but it could not bring back the soldiers who died because of his corruption. It could not undo 6 years of her life spent in shadows. It could not erase the things she had done while operating without authority. After the hearing, Morrison found her standing on the courthouse steps. The media had finally dispersed. The protesters had gone home. It was just the 2 of them in the fading afternoon light. The Pentagon called. Morrison said, "They want to discuss your status. Officially, you are still listed as killed in action. That needs to be resolved." "What are my options?" Elena asked. Morrison pulled out a folder. "They are offering you full reinstatement with back pay and benefits. your rank restored, an honorable discharge if you want it, or you can return to active duty with a position at Marine Corps Scout Sniper School, training the next generation. And if I refuse all of that, Elena asked, then you remain legally dead and they pretend the last 6 years never happened. You disappear again. No questions asked. Elena took the folder but did not open it. What did you decide? About your own status? Morrison smiled slightly. I am retiring. Full pension. Honorable discharge. After 32 years, I think I have earned the right to stop fighting bureaucracy and corruption from inside the system. Maybe I will teach. Maybe I will write a book. Maybe I will just fish and forget this whole mess. You deserve that, Elena said. So do you? Morrison replied. You save lives. You expose corruption. You did more in 6 years operating alone than most units accomplish in a decade. But you also paid a price. You lost your identity, your connections, your place in the world. The question is, what do you want now? Elena looked out at the city. For 6 years, she had been a ghost. No name, no past, no future, just missions and targets and the endless cycle of survival. She had told herself it was duty, that she was serving even without official sanction. But the truth was she had been hiding from a betrayal that made her ghost, hiding from the vulnerability of being seen. Caldwell appeared from inside the courthouse, moving slowly with a cane. His leg was healing, but it would never be the same. He would never run again, never deploy to combat zones. But he was alive, and he had helped bring down the man who tried to eliminate him. Captain Reeves, Caldwell said as he reached them, I wanted to thank you before we all go our separate ways. You gave me my life back. Twice. Once in Afghanistan and once in that courtroom. I was just doing my duty, Elena said. Caldwell shook his head. No, duty is following orders and completing missions. What you did was more than that. You fought for what was right even when it cost you everything. That is not duty. That is courage. Elena felt emotion rise in her throat. She pushed it down and nodded. What will you do now? SOCOM offered me a position overseeing special operations training and evaluation, Caldwell said. No more field work, but I can help shape the next generation of operators. Make sure they learn from our mistakes. I accepted. He extended his hand, and Elena shook it. His grip was firm despite his injuries. There was respect in his eyes, and gratitude, and something that looked like friendship. If you ever need anything, he said, anything at all, you call me. I owe you my life. That debt does not expire. Patterson and Kowalski emerged from the courthouse together. Both had testified during the trial. Both had faced their own consequences for disobeying orders and helping Elena escape. But they had been cleared of wrongdoing. The Navy had determined they acted to prevent a greater injustice. Captain Patterson said, we wanted to say goodbye. We are shipping out tomorrow. Back to Virginia Beach. Back to the teams. You're staying in? Elena asked. Kowalski nodded. Someone needs to keep an eye on the new guys. Make sure they understand what real leadership looks like and what it does not look like. He meant Vaughn, the lieutenant commander who had abandoned his own men, who had chosen career over conscience, who had died in a cell rather than face the consequences of his choices. Take care of each other, Elena said, and remember what you learned. Good leaders do not leave people behind. Yes, ma'am, Patterson said. They saluted her even though she had no official rank. She returned the salute and watched them walk away. Two good men who had made the right choice when it mattered. The teams would be better for having them. Morrison checked his watch. I need to head to the Pentagon for exit processing. What will you tell them? About your status? Elena looked down at the folder in her hands. Inside were forms that would restore her identity. Give her back her name and rank. Let her return to the world of official recognition and bureaucratic accountability. But they would also end her ability to operate in shadows, to go places and do things that official operators could not, to be the ghost that saved lives no one knew needed saving. I do not know yet, she admitted. Morrison put a hand on her shoulder. Whatever you decide, you did good work. You saved lives. You exposed corruption. You proved that one person with courage can make a difference. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. He walked away, leaving Elena alone on the courthouse steps. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. She thought about the last 6 years, the missions, the kills, the loneliness of being no one in a world of someone's. But she also thought about the people she had saved, the Taliban commanders she eliminated before they could kill American soldiers, the intelligence she gathered that prevented attacks, the difference she made precisely because she operated without oversight or limitation. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. The voice on the other end was familiar. The operator who had recovered the documents from Afghanistan. "We heard about the verdict. Congratulations." "Thank you," Elena said. "And thank you for the assist. Could not have done it without you." There was a pause. Then the voice spoke again. "We have a situation developing in Syria. High-value target. Difficult approach. The kind of job that requires someone who does not officially exist. Interested?" Elena closed her eyes. There it was. The choice laid out clearly. Return to official status and live in the light. Or remain a ghost and continue fighting in shadows. She thought about Caldwell with his silver hair and shattered leg. She thought about Morrison retiring after 32 years of service. She thought about Patterson and Kowalski returning to their teams. They had all found their place, their purpose, their peace. But her place was not in official channels. Her purpose was not in bureaucratic structures. Her peace came from doing what needed to be done regardless of authorization or recognition. "Send me the details," Elena said into the phone. "I will look at it." The voice on the other end expressed satisfaction. "Good to have you back, Ghost. The target package will be in your secure drop within the hour." The call ended. Elena stood on the courthouse steps holding her phone in one hand and the Pentagon folder in the other. She looked at the folder for a long moment. Then she dropped it in a nearby trash can. Some people were meant to operate in the light, with ranks and medals and official recognition. But she was not one of them. She was the ghost, the shadow, the sniper nobody saw coming. And there were still targets that needed eliminating, still lives that needed saving, still work that needed someone willing to operate without glory or acknowledgement. She walked down the courthouse steps and disappeared into the evening crowd. Just another face in the city. Nobody special, nobody important, nobody you would look at twice. Exactly the way she liked it. 3 months later, Morrison received a letter. No return address. Just a brief note in handwriting he recognized. The target in Syria has been eliminated. 12 American hostages extracted safely. Official reports will credit a Delta Force operation. We both know better. Some battles are fought in darkness. Some victories go unrecorded. Some heroes stay ghosts. Thank you for understanding. Stay well. It was unsigned, but Morrison knew exactly who sent it. He smiled and filed the letter away. Elena Reeves had made her choice, and the world was safer for it, whether the world knew it or not. Caldwell stood before a class of new Scout sniper students at Quantico. He was 6 months into his new position, and he loved the work. Teaching, mentoring, shaping the next generation. On the wall behind him was a photograph. It showed the top graduates from the Marine Scout Sniper School class of 2015. Front and center was a young captain with determined eyes and a slight smile. Elena Reeves. One of the students raised his hand. "Sir, is it true that Captain Reeves is the only female Marine to ever graduate first in her class from sniper school?" "It is true," Caldwell said. "What happened to her, sir?" Another student asked. "I heard she was killed in action." Caldwell looked at the photograph, at the young captain who would grow up to become a ghost, who would save his life twice, who would bring down a corrupt general and then disappear back into shadows. "She served with honor," Caldwell said simply, "and she inspired everyone who knew her to be better than they thought they could be. That is all that matters." The students nodded, and Caldwell continued his lecture. But he glanced at the photograph one more time and smiled. Somewhere in the world, Ghost was still operating, still fighting, still saving lives nobody knew needed saving. And that was exactly how it should be. 2 years had passed since the trial. The story of General Sutton's corruption had faded from headlines. Life moved on the way it always did. But the ripples from that case spread further than anyone realized. At Marine Corps Scout Sniper School, Caldwell watched as the first all-female sniper team graduated with honors. Their instructor was a former Delta operator who had learned from the best. When asked who inspired them, each woman mentioned the legend of Captain Elena Reeves, the ghost who came back to expose corruption. Caldwell smiled every time he heard her name, because he knew something they did not. Ghost was not a legend of the past. She was still out there, still operating, still making a difference in places that had no names on maps. Morrison had retired to a cabin in Montana. He spent his days fishing and his evenings writing. His memoir about military corruption became a bestseller. The proceeds went to a foundation he established for veterans wrongfully accused of crimes. He called it the Ghost Foundation. Elena never contacted him about the name, but every year on the anniversary of Sutton's conviction, he received an anonymous donation for exactly $47,000, $1,000 for each target she had eliminated. Patterson made Chief Petty Officer. Kowalski retired after 30 years and became a consultant training foreign special operations units. They stayed in touch. Once a year, they met at a bar in Virginia Beach and raised a glass to the silver-haired commander who survived because a ghost refused to leave anyone behind. The media had moved on to other scandals, other corruption cases, other heroes and villains. But in the special operations community, the story lived on. It became part of the culture, the legend that reminded everyone what real leadership looked like and what it did not look like. Elena stood on a rooftop in Mogadishu, watching the sun rise over the Indian Ocean. She had been in Somalia for 3 weeks, tracking a terrorist financier who moved money for al-Shabaab. Last night, she had eliminated him with a single shot from 900 meters. Clean, precise, final. Her extraction helicopter was 30 minutes out. She had time to think, time to reflect on the path she had chosen. She pulled out a worn photograph from her vest pocket. It showed her standing with her Marine sniper platoon 7 years ago. Young faces full of confidence and purpose. 3 of those faces were gone now, killed in combat before she faked her death. She looked at their faces and wondered what they would think of her now. Operating without authorization, killing without official sanction, living in shadows while the world moved on without her. But then she thought about the hostages she had rescued in Syria, the American aid workers who would have been executed if she had not intervened. She thought about the Taliban commanders who would have killed dozens more soldiers if she had not eliminated them. She thought about Caldwell, alive and teaching because she made a different choice than his own team. The good she had done, the lives she had saved, the difference she made precisely because she operated outside the system. Her radio crackled. "Ghost, this is Nighthawk. We are 5 minutes out. LZ is cold. Ready for pickup." "Copy that," Elena replied. Standing by, she secured the photograph and checked her gear one final time. The sniper rifle that had served her for 6 years. The suppressor worn smooth from use. The scope that had seen targets from mountain ridgelines to urban rooftops. Tools of her trade. Instruments of her purpose. The helicopter appeared over the ocean, low and fast. It flared over the rooftop, and Elena climbed aboard. The crew chief gave her a nod of recognition. They had worked together before, in places that did not exist, on missions that never happened. As the helicopter banked away from Mogadishu, Elena looked down at the city below. Somewhere down there, people were waking up safer than they had been yesterday. They would never know why. Would never know that a threat had been removed, would never know that a ghost had been watching over them. And that was fine. She did not need recognition, did not want medals or parades. She just needed to know that the work mattered, that the sacrifices meant something, that choosing to stay dead had saved more lives than coming back to life ever could. Her phone buzzed with an encrypted message. New target package. High value. Time sensitive. Yemen. She read through the details and felt the familiar focus settle over her. Another mission, another opportunity to make a difference. This was her life now. This was her choice, and she had no regrets. 3 weeks later, Caldwell received a package at his office. Inside was a single item, a challenge coin from the Marine Scout Sniper Program. On one side was the traditional insignia. On the other side was a custom engraving, a ghost with a sniper rifle, and beneath it 3 words, "Never leave anyone." Caldwell held the coin and felt emotion well up. He knew who sent it, knew what it meant. It was acknowledgement, gratitude, a reminder that some bonds transcended official channels and bureaucratic structures. He placed the coin on his desk where he could see it every day, a reminder of the captain who saved his life, the ghost who chose duty over comfort, the sniper who understood that some fights had to be waged in darkness. That evening, Caldwell gave a speech to graduating sniper students. He told them about leadership, about making hard choices, about the responsibility that came with being able to take a life from a kilometer away. And he told them about a captain whose name was on a memorial wall, but whose legend lived on. He told them about the night a SEAL team made the tactical decision to leave their commander behind, and about the sniper who made a different decision. He did not tell them she was still alive, did not tell them she was still operating. Some secrets needed to stay buried, but he made sure they understood the lesson. Real warriors do not leave people behind. Not when it matters. Not when there is still a chance. Not when courage demands better. The students listened with rapt attention. Some would remember this lesson. Some would carry it with them into combat. And maybe, when they faced their own impossible choices, they would remember the ghost who chose courage over convenience. After the speech, one student approached Caldwell, a young woman with determined eyes that reminded him of Elena. "Sir," she said, "do you think Captain Reeves would be proud of us? Of what we are trying to become?" Caldwell looked at her and smiled. "I think Captain Reeves would tell you that pride comes from doing the right thing, even when it costs you everything, and that the hardest battles are often fought alone in places nobody sees. But those battles matter, maybe more than all the others." The student nodded and walked away with purpose in her step. Caldwell watched her go and thought about Elena somewhere in the world, watching, fighting, saving lives nobody knew needed saving. Morrison published his second book that year. It was fiction, a thriller about a female sniper who faked her death and operated in shadows to fight corruption. Critics said it was unrealistic, too fantastic. The protagonist was too skilled, too dedicated, too willing to sacrifice everything for duty. Morrison just smiled and sent a copy to an address in Switzerland that forwarded mail to locations unknown. 3 months later, he received a postcard. No message, just a picture of a sunset over mountains that could have been anywhere. But in the bottom corner, almost too small to see, was a signature, a simple letter G. He framed the postcard and hung it in his office. A reminder that truth was often stranger than fiction, and that some heroes prefer to stay in shadows. If you enjoyed this story, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite part, character, or if you have had a similar situation happen to you before. 5 years after the trial, the Department of Defense issued a quiet directive. All special operations units were required to implement new oversight protocols for financial transactions and equipment requisitions. The Ghost Protocol, they called it, named after an operation that officially never happened. Caldwell heard about it and laughed. Even in death, or whatever state Elena existed in now, she was changing the system, making it harder for the next Sutton to corrupt and betray. He pulled out his challenge coin and turned it over in his fingers. Never leave anyone. Those 3 words had become his personal motto. He taught it to his students. He lived it in his work. And he knew that somewhere in the world, a ghost was living it too. Elena stood at a cemetery in Arlington on a cold November morning. She wore civilian clothes and sunglasses, just another visitor among hundreds. She walked between the white headstones until she found the one she was looking for. Captain Elena Reeves, United States Marine Corps, killed in action, Helmand-Province, Afghanistan. She stood before her own grave and thought about the woman who had died here 7 years ago. The young captain who believed in the system, who followed orders, who thought duty meant obedience. That woman was gone. In her place was something different, something harder, something willing to operate outside the rules when the rules themselves became corrupt. She placed a single flower on the headstone, not mourning who she had been, just acknowledging the transformation, the choice, the cost. As she turned to leave, she saw an older woman standing nearby. The woman was looking at Elena with tears in her eyes. She stepped forward hesitantly. "You look so much like her," the woman whispered. "My daughter, Elena. You could be her twin." Elena's breath caught. Her mother, standing right there, believing her daughter was dead, mourning at a grave that held no body. For a moment, Elena wanted to tell her, wanted to reveal the truth, wanted to embrace her mother and explain everything. But she knew she could not. Knowing Elena was alive would put her mother in danger, would make her a target for anyone who wanted to hurt the ghost. "I am sorry for your loss," Elena said quietly. "She must have been an extraordinary person." "She was," her mother replied. "She was brave and strong, and she believed in doing what was right, even when it cost her everything." Elena felt tears threatening. She blinked them back. "Those sound like good qualities to remember her by." Her mother nodded and turned back to the headstone. Elena walked away quickly before emotion betrayed her, before she made a choice that would endanger the person she loved most. That night, from a hotel room in D.C., Elena sent an encrypted message to an account her mother checked occasionally. It was an account Elena had set up years ago, routing through so many servers that no one could trace it. The message was simple. "I love you, Mom. I am safe. I'm doing good work. I hope that is enough." She never received a reply. But 2 days later, her mother posted on social media about visiting her daughter's grave and feeling a strange sense of peace, as if Elena was somehow still watching over her. Elena read the post and smiled through tears. Some sacrifices were worth it. Some secrets protected the people you loved. And some ghosts kept watch over the living, even when the living did not know it. 10 years after Sutton's conviction, the legend of Ghost had grown into something larger than Elena herself. Young operators told stories about the female sniper who operated for a decade without official sanction. Intelligence analysts debated whether she was one person or many. Conspiracy theorists claimed she was a government asset that officials denied. The truth was simpler and more complicated. Elena Reeves had chosen to stay dead so she could keep living on her own terms, fighting battles that needed fighting, saving lives that needed saving, making differences that mattered even when nobody knew who to thank. She was the ghost in the machine, the shadow that protected the light, the sniper nobody saw coming. And she would keep going as long as there were targets that needed eliminating and people who needed saving. Because some warriors are not meant for parades and medals. Some heroes operate best in darkness. And some people understand that the highest form of service is the kind nobody ever knows about. Elena Reeves was at peace with that. She had found her purpose, her place, her calling. The SEALs had given up on their commander, but a legendary female sniper had brought him back alive. And in doing so, she had reminded the world what real courage looked like. It looked like never leaving anyone behind, even when it cost everything, even when it meant staying dead, even when it meant fighting forever in shadows. That was the legend. That was the truth. That was Ghost.